Opening slide graphic text title, Making Home Every Day. What promotes or denies a sense of home? With Janet Klees, image of Janet Klees, text, Purpose Matters Conference, logos, belonging matters, and talksthatmatter.net.
All right. Hello. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you, Lachlan, for that introduction. I do feel like I'm among friends with many people associated with Belonging Matters. I'm speaking today from land that was stewarded for hundreds of years by the Indigenous people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island Nation. I'm well aware of the importance of home and not having home and having home stolen for our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and that is on my mind as I'm talking today. This is where we're at. Home is something so simple and obvious and familiar to most of us that we just really don't think about it very intentionally, and sometimes we just take it for granted. Today, I'm also keeping in mind the many, many people around the world who don't have access to secure, stable housing, much less home. I know that for the most part in today's audience, I'm addressing people who are in different circumstances. And yet at the same time, I hope that we all recognize and embrace the privilege we have in being able to, for the most part, focus on home and community rather than safety and survival. So let's not waste this precious kind of time and opportunity with what we have. And at the same time, as Teresa pointed out earlier, I'm aware that so many people with disabilities who we care about don't have access to real home, to a place that they can call home or presence within a home where they can say deeply, this is my home. This is my home, not my agency's home, not my service provider's apartment, not my staff's place, not my mother's home, but truly my own home. My home implies something different than the place in which I live. It implies a sense of control and autonomy and a way of being within that space. In today's audience, I'm assuming that you are mostly people dedicated to ensuring real home for and with a person with a disability that you care about deeply enough to be able to really want to support their dream, to bring about ways that home can be that space of strength, renewal, learning and growth, security, privacy, and growing into one's own. In our own love and experience of home and its possibilities, we want to bring this feeling, the sense of home to the lives of people with disabilities that we love. So a focus on home really does matter, and I'm going to outline several ways that it matters. And this is important to keep at the backdrop. This isn't something that we're just playing at, but it really makes a significant difference in many people's lives. When it's done well, along familiar and valued lines, a home, like all others, home is an effective change agency tool. Making home well results putting good, familiar images of people with disabilities holding home-based roles into the minds of others. What they then see isn't easily unseen, and I think this is what is going to really significantly change expectations of our community for the future of people with disabilities in their homes. And this is really important because we live in a society where adults with disabilities are seen and treated as eternal children, and where families are given messages of the deficits of their children, surrounded by constant, really low expectations, where they are often seen as burdens for life, and where their contributions or gifts are rarely sought out, if they're even noticed at all. So the challenge for families, for young people themselves with disability, is to keep on those ordinary pathways to home. And that challenge is difficult when there's always things that are wanting to knock people off of that pathway. So setting the expectation of making a real home of one's own, just like your brothers and sisters, and following through with actions to prepare for that set of expectations sets, the opportunity in motion for the person themselves and our community to begin to see things differently in ordinary ways, that this needs to be taking place. Having a home of one's own is also an act of autonomy where the voice of the person making home speaks louder than words made by that person. Supporting your family member to have and make home is an act of faith in a person's abilities to make significant decisions in the direction of their lives. The expectation that one day this person will have a home or a flat of their own signals to the person themselves and to others that they are indeed on the ordinary and valued path of life. Building and making home every day with a person directing and taking center stage, I think, is a political statement. And then lastly, a safe home really anchors a person. And this is not a statement around people with disabilities. For all of us, when we are, deeply grounded in a home that we feel is safe and secure and where we can be ourselves, that is when our real growth begins. It may not be overnight. It might take a while, but you begin to experiment with things and grow in your confidence and your skills to become everything that you were meant to be in your life. And in my experience with families of the Ohago over a 2-decade period, it wasn't unusual for people to need to spend about 3 years deeply making home before they really, showed what was possible in the rest of their lives. So keep that in mind as well. So home has the potential to be one's anchor and refuge where one gathers and holds strength and where one is at their best self. Home is potentially where you might be queen of your castle, sometimes sharing and negotiating your power, but having that power nonetheless. However, there are actions and approaches that will either promote or deny the fullness of what home might be. There is no guarantee that having a house or flat means that you have a home, nor that living apart from mom and dad means that your home is truly your own. So what really counts? Today, I'm going to focus on only 5 important ways to promote a sustained sense of home for and with a person with a disability. So let's anchor ourselves right here. And this is a part of the program where you get to look for that chat function on your screen and begin to kind of let me know, this is just for you yourself. What is your definition of home? What is home? You might complete the statement, home is the place where. So what does home deeply mean to you? And we want to anchor ourselves in real home for those of us who have deeply experienced this already. So I want to do this, you to do this even while I continue to talk a little bit. And when Teresa tells me there's significant comments in the chat, she'll interrupt and let me know some of what you have on your minds about this. We all know that what home means to us, and we have things that are important to our sense of home. In fact, many of us want and need the same things of home for us to feel safe, comfortable, and control, and to have that sense of home. And so, what do we yearn for? Is it a degree of privacy or respect or autonomy, or to be that queen of your castle? What gives you a sense of home? Is it people? Is it certain items? Is it control and setting limits? Is it being a significant part of the decisions that are made in the home? And what's essential to you, that you decide who comes and goes, that you decide, what's your safe space, who gets to be there with you, who you might want to live with, or if you'd prefer to live just on your own, that's also possible. So your sense of home certainly grows over time and experience, and what you think is vital to home today is probably different from when you were 20. And so your sense of home, some of aspects will be a little different than your sons and daughters as they're starting out. But we have experiences over time. We experience home, we get a sense of different things, and we build this idea of what is potential for home. And so Teresa, I don't know if you see anything coming through there that you can share with me.
We have, Janet. A few people have responded. So Emily says, a safe place. Leanne, a place where I can be me. I can shut the world out, be myself. Home means love, sharing with our loved ones, safety, space to be creative, space to think, to enjoy life, have people visit, a place where I can be myself. And Jane, a place I can relax. And a home at home means the people we love are around us and where we can keep our kids safe.
Wonderful. Great. Well, you just continue to write them and read them. And I really encourage people to write these down for yourselves, to articulate that sense of home for yourself, to do it together with your family member and find out some of the things that they would include on that list. And the reason you want to do this is we really want this sense of home. It's really a vision of home to be really rooted and centered in your thinking, because many things are going to come by that are not real home, and you need to know the difference. You need to have, a guidepost, a really strong center that gives you a place of comparison. What I'm encouraging you is not to settle for good enough, right? You're going to be offered a good enough. It's good enough to group people together just based on disability. It's good enough to open up in Canada buildings for seniors, people with mental health issues, and people with disabilities all together, another kind of congregation. It's good enough to be in places where there's so many rules, weird rules where you have no control, or there's so many places that are special places for special people. And none of those are going to deliver that sense of home that touches on the list that we just created. So you want that list as a touchstone. Here in Canada, we have, something that's called, try it on for size, a little 3-month apartment experiment where you can go and live in a different part of the city that you don't know, with people as potential roommates for 3 months that you don't know, and with staff that you haven't chosen, and in a neighborhood that you don't know and you don't need to get to know because you're not going to stay there. And that will give you no sense of home whatsoever. And yet it's called, a home testing opportunity. We have Apple Blossom Village, which sounds like a delightful place, but it's far away from where most people live. And when families that we're involved with had a good look at it and tested that one out, they said it had none of the aspects of safety and refuge and family and connection and belonging, and nothing that they could compare at all. So that is actually my very first kind of tip, or strong belief in one of the ways that is vital to having and promoting a sense of home for people, and that is to describe and hang on to a vision of real home as your standard against which to compare all options. So you don't settle for good enough. A sense of home really flows from a real home, an understanding of real home, and clear and high expectations also flow from this vision. If that's the vision, and you're expecting and talking to your sons and daughters about moving in that direction, you're setting some really, really nice high standards for everyone to work toward. Making home every day is something that I talk about all the time, making home, and I say that quite deliberately. And that is because home is a concept both best and most powerfully made, renewed, and reinforced and practiced every single day. And it is an act of daily practice that one needs to engage in order to hang on to that sense of home. So if you're not working at home, if you're not part of making home, then it's very possible that the home, is not a place. You can live somewhere without it truly being your home, because the person who's actually making home is not yourself. So we really need to think about this. Whoops, I'm just jumping ahead a little bit. I see many people in so-called homes of their own. And one example I have was a few years ago, I stepped into Greta's apartment in a city in the west of Canada. And the supporter answered the door and took my coat and ushered me into the living room. Greta was introduced and I admired her lovely place. The supporter thanked me and asked Greta to ask me if I wanted coffee. She didn't reply, and the supporter hastily then asked me herself and went and made coffee and brought it and served it. And then we, chatted about the apartment a little bit. And the supporter told me where she had gone to find these lovely places, and then brought Greta in to kind of give the nod to the different pieces. And so throughout that conversation, Greta was left to sit and only participate in the chatting, which is the least active and the most difficult part of any kind of getting to know a stranger. When she could have answered the door and taken my coat and asked me about coffee in a way that was different from what they tried to prod her to do, showed me the view from her window, made and served perhaps a little dessert that she had made, knowing I was coming and I was coming from far away. There were so many missed opportunities for Greta to be involved in making home. So she lived in this apartment, but was never assisted to be the one making home. And although I did compliment her on her lovely home, in so many ways, it didn't feel like hers at all. And so attention has to be paid to who is doing the making, who is in the lead, who makes the big decisions and the small ones, who is helping who. And it is in great part this detail, the small details that will ensure people are living lives of their own. And we're going to pay more attention to this as we go through. But that really is the second kind of big way that I want to talk about promoting a sense of home, is understanding as home is something we make every day. And we really need to be asking, is the person making home the person who says it is their home? The person making home is building home. And who is doing this? Is it the supporter? Is it the mother? Or is it the person themselves? Right? And part of that, who is doing the assisting? If mom's bustling around the apartment and the daughter is assisting, whose home is it really? Okay. So let me tell you just a couple of stories to provide a few other concepts that I want us to think about today. This is Tiffany, who's an artist and a good friend of mine, and I've been kind of involved in her life for about 3 decades. I can't believe that. She's been living in a home of her own for the last 25 years, and I think that statement alone should be a great hurrah, right? And so Tiffany, the little tiny story I just want to tell about her is that when I visit Tiffany, I come up to her front door and I knock and I wait and I listen. And having been involved in her life and helping her to make home over many, many years, I'm listening for something very specific that we have tried to convey to her support people year after year after year. And when I knock at the door, I am waiting for a supporter to say something like, "Oh, Tiffany, there's a knock at your door. It's probably Janet. She said she was coming to visit this afternoon. And, do you want to get the door or shall I today?" And I expect the supporter then to pause and wait and have some indication, some physical indication from Tiffany if she's getting up or if she's kind of throwing her hands back and saying, "No, it's on you today," right? And then Tiffany will slowly come to the door and will be assisted to open the automatic door opener. And then I expect the supporter not to say a word while Tiffany is the first one who looks into my eyes and greets me and nods and makes some kind of joyous sound that it is indeed me who's come to the door, who takes my arm, walks me into her living room and helps me feel thoroughly, thoroughly welcomed, right? And so here is Tiffany fully in control of holding that role of host. And she is the one who welcomes people into her home in her way. And there's so many ways we have been able to pull supporters out of that picture and out of that kind of taking that away from her. And so Tiffany has lots of occasions in her life where she welcomes people. Over the last 3 decades, 2.5 that she's been in her apartment, she has really defined this art of deciding who and how they are going to be welcomed into her home. And that was done thoughtfully and intentionally with great impact. Brenda is someone else I want to talk about. Brenda is someone who loves nature and is a genuine homebody who just enjoys her home so much. Also, 25 years ago, moving into her apartment, we had some moments of very, very important learning. And one of them was Brenda would have moments where the world would kind of overcome her. She'd be totally frustrated with what was happening around and her inability to get to do what she wanted to do or what she thought was necessary. And in those moments of being overwhelmed and upset, she may well, many times she just charged right out of the apartment and down the hallway and was upset, wherever she could find space. After this had happened several times, a couple of us, got together and said, what's wrong with this picture? We want for Brenda home to be haven and a refuge. And, when she's upset, she should be staying here. And if anything, we should be leaving. How do we help her see her home as haven? And what we learned to do was to identify the very moment where she was getting upset and there was probably no kind of getting over it in a calm kind of way. And so we learned to slip out the door. So what Brenda learned was when Brenda is upset, home is her refuge and her safe haven. And the people who are just a little too much for her, they're the ones who leave. And we go down the hall, sit in the lobby a bit, come back a while later. And most often we knocked on the door. She was happy to see us again. And that is how we learned, that's the huge definition of home. Who leaves when you're upset, when you're in your face? She can kick people out of her apartment, out of her home. That was really, really important. And so she is somebody who kind of taught us how we really needed to create that sense of refuge for people, a person who hadn't experienced that before. So this brings us to, these are two illustrations of, a third point that's really, really important in promoting a sense of home. And that is asking, whose home is it, right? And more deeply than simply the making of the home, it's to really ensure that it's truly a home of a person's own. And it's an issue of the person having a significant voice in making decisions. And so, when I'm upset, you leave, that's a decision that I'm making. And an issue of the roles that are deeply held. And we're going to get to that in a few minutes. But whose home is it? Asking that question and making sure that you've got a valid and strong answer that's centered in the person, and learning to recognize and reinforce that is really, really important in promoting that sense of home. So another thing that, really promotes our ability to afford others the sense of home is understanding the power of roles in the concept of home. And so I'm going to start with a story because it's what I do. So Brent, this is a young man whose mother came to a group of families having conversation a few years back. And we were all talking about, the families were talking about what might be a role that young adults would have in family life. And it took a while. Many of the families there agreed that they had young people in their 20s living at home for lack of other options for the most part. But they were really living as children in the family home and not as adults. They were making no meaningful contribution to the family. And so after some conversation and figuring out what Brent was interested in, here he is as a really young guy, already interested in food and shopping, and thinking about how do you build on that interest in order to help him make a contribution to his family. And they decided that he could well be involved in the family grocery shopping, but if we put a paid support person in place instead of dad, it really was a contribution to the family, giving them some extra time and having Brent take on a role, a significant and important small role in the family. And so he became the family grocery shopper. And Brent's mother talks about the fact that this was so new that he had a significant role where he actually made a contribution. She ended up bragging and boasting about it with other family members. They were let off the hook. Their son was now doing the grocery shopping. How great was that? When grandma fell and broke her hip and the family gathered around to see how they would support her over this period of rehabilitation, one of the uncles turned around to Brent and said, well, you're the family grocery shopper. Can you be grandma's grocery shopper as well? And so his role expanded a little bit. And Brent's mom would say, she said, that's the first time that any of my brothers had ever acknowledged or understood that he had a contribution to make. And it started by us demanding or offering contribution from him and talking about it and putting that idea in the minds of our family. And so everyone's expectation about who Brent was and could be expanded. When Brent was delivering groceries one time to a neighbor, in the building where his grandmother lived, she came out and said, "Oh, I wish someone would do my shopping for me." And soon enough, there was Brent adding yet another grocery list to his shopping quite happily. And this one for pay, because it was outside of the family and she was offering him a little bit of compensation to do this. And this is a tiny example of a family role, started out as a family role, but how the concept of role brings so much more to people than simply filling in time. Role brings for him identity and purpose and contribution, a familiarity of doing it again and again and getting better and better at it, and therefore new opportunities and the ever-present greater relationships, some with just his uncle, some with some new neighbors, right? And so this is 5 minutes. Okay. This is what role does for people. It provides all of these things. I need to hurry along here. And so we need to learn how to deepen current positive roles and also to identify what are possible areas that we could move into for home anchored roles overall. So I had wanted to do this as a brainstorm, but I think my time has moved along a little faster than I had thought. So I just want to say, around home, if we think about the areas of food or cleaning, hosting, plants and gardening, there are so many roles. And I challenge you, you can do this even when I'm talking in the chat, and to think about what are the ways that people, who could they be around food in their family home, in a home of their own? You know, they could be the cook, but they could be even more deeply involved. They could be the snack maker. They could be the dessert queen who brings, you know, the best dessert to all of the family potlucks. They could be the a lunch prep gal, the person who brings something, who makes a lunch for her and maybe some family members every evening, so they've got lunch the next day. They can be meal planner. They can be gifter of food to the family as gifts. They can be foodie or food critic or food blogger. Those are just the food roles, and you can imagine those in hundreds of different ways. There's cleaning and maintenance roles, including, you know, inside the house. There's, you know, the bathroom cleaner and all the things, but there's the car maintenance guy and the guy, you know, the one that takes care of the car and brings it to the car wash. Painter, renovators, as terms of roles. And then there's the hosting roles that the people just like embrace and love, you know, host of baby showers and weddings, host of international visitors. That was Brenda for a while. Lots of hosting roles, indoor gardening, planting, gardening roles, where you're, you know, making gardens and sharing them with other people. Organizing, coordinating roles, leisure and relaxing roles. So what are the contributions that people can make, and how do you name those roles? That's just, there's so much power in that coming about. And so that's the fourth thing we're talking about, using the power of roles, understanding how to bring these roles versus activities to bring about identity, purpose, contribution, and a relationship into people's lives. And of course, the final thing I want to say in terms of the list of things is you want to fold relationship in from the very beginning. The very idea of role involves another person or has the potential to, so you need to challenge yourself on how to do that. You'll probably be able to get a copy of these slides. So there's a sense of questions, most of which I've covered, to help you take your thinking about home and say, are your thoughts centered on real home opportunities or just special and good enough? Are you, does the person have a significant voice in this home? Whose home is it? Who's helping who? What contributions are being made through role? What messages are you putting into the minds of other people? Is there a growth mindset in place? Are you using information information about the role that your sons and daughters take on, for information and updates to put new ideas into people's minds? Are you creating space for relationship? All of what, so the 5 ideas I've tried to present today in, split second time here is: you want to have a solid vision of real home. You want to be the one making home. You want a clarity on whose home this is, using the power of roles in the context of home, and always folding in relationship. And so I think I've come practically to the end of my time here, and I wanted to say thank you for the stories and photos that I've been gracefully allowed to provide by the list of people written here. And this is Caleb locking his apartment door in the final photo.
Closing slide graphic text with thanks to Janet Klees, Crowd Comms, Purpose Matters Conference 2022. This video was made possible with the support of an information and capacity building grant through the Department of Social Services. Produced by Belonging Matters. Belonging Matters makes every effort to provide accurate and up-to-date material. However, information is subject to change, and our materials for reference only. This video was filmed on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation. Logos, Belonging Matters, talksthatmatter.net.
Graphic text. More Purpose Matters conference videos. To watch more videos from the Purpose Matters conference, please head to free videos on the Talks That Matter website, talksthatmatter.net. Logos, Belonging Matters, Talks That Matter.